Today we're going to talk about popliteal blocks, one of the most useful regional anesthesia procedures ever. But before we get started, if you like Nysora's videos, make sure that you click subscribe. So to describe the popliteal block, we're going to be using the material from the Nysora's all-new Compendium of Regional Anesthesia. It is just an amazing online e-learning resource where you can either read or listen while you commute. Let's talk about indications and quick facts. Well, basically, when it comes to popliteal block, you can do bunionectomies, you can do Achilles tendon repair, you can do triple arthrodesis, just about anything on the foot. But this is one of my favorite indications, and that is Achilles tendon repair with the patient in a prone position awake. Now, if the surgeons can use the tourniquet on the calf, that clearly would be no-brainer. But if they are not able or do not wish to use a tourniquet on the calf, and have to use a tourniquet on the thigh, you can combine the long-acting anesthetic for the popliteal sciatic block and a short-acting anesthetic such as lidocaine for the femoral nerve block, which basically would also eliminate the tourniquet pain. Okay, so let's see what the goals of the technique are. The goal of this technique, you really want to spread the local anesthetic inside the sciatic nerve sheath in the popliteal fossa. Let's enlarge this a little bit. So here we can see the tibial nerve and the common peroneal nerve. These two nerves are enveloped in a common sheath, and the goal for the technique is to find the spot, the place where these two nerves just start to separate so that you can place the needle safely in between them and fill that space with a local anesthetic. And very useful trick. You can do this out of plane or you can do this in plane. It's really your choice, but you really should select the in plane versus out of plane, not what you do best, but what the anatomical configuration of the sciatic nerve in the popliteal fossa is. Most of the time, the popliteal nerve, the two nerves, the tibial and common peroneal, are very superficial in the popliteal fossa. So if they are superficial at about 2-3 centimeters depth, oftentimes it's much easier to actually do an out-of-plane position and see the two nerves separate. And then a tip. If you are injecting here, you want to scan proximally, because if your injection here results in a spread of the local anesthetic 3, 4, 5 centimeters proximally in the same sheath, there's no other place where you could be but in the sciatic nerve sheath where you want to be. So that's the popliteal fossa crease. That's the tendon of the semitendinosus and semimembranosus muscles, and that's the biceps femoris tendon. So now if you know these anatomical surface points, then all we need to do is place the transducer at about 2 to 3 centimeters proximal to the popliteal fossa crease in between these tendons, usually a little closer to the biceps femoris tendon. Usually at that location, without searching any further, you will be able to see the sciatic nerve. We're looking into the popliteal fossa space, and what we see is two specific nerves. This is the tibial nerve, and that's the common peroneal nerve. The goal of the technique is to inject a local anesthetic in that space between the two nerves, the tibial nerve and the common peroneal nerve. Now, the sweet spot for this nerve block is you start acquiring images just above the popliteal fossa crease, which is here, and then you move your transducer more proximally, because you first see usually tibial nerve, and then you move in your transducer proximally until you see both of these nerves, both the tibial nerve and the common peroneal nerve. And then you go back more distally until you see these two nerves sufficiently separated by a space where you can inject the local anesthetic inside the sheath that envelops them. Let's see that from another perspective. Here we can see the tibial nerve. That's the common peroneal nerve. That's the popliteal artery and popliteal vein. But the point of injection for this block will always be in between the two nerves. So we really want to find that sweet spot where the nerves are together in the sheath. They have not separated yet, but they still have sufficient space in between them, so we can easily place the needle between them into the sheath in order to avoid the injury and deposit the local anesthetic. Because a nerve block is always an injection of the local anesthetic in the space that contains the nerves. The popliteal block will provide you quite large sensory motor coverage. In other words, once you have a popliteal block, you're going to actually have a foot drop for the duration of the block and quite wide sensory coverage. It actually covers 4 nerves. That's a tibial, posterior tibial nerve, common peroneal nerve, superficial peroneal nerve, and the sural nerve. The only nerve that we don't cover with the popliteal block that involves innervation of the foot and the leg below the knee is the saphenous nerve. So we start scanning just above the popliteal fossa crease, and the idea is that once we localize the tibial nerve, we want to follow that tibial nerve more proximally when it joins the common peroneal nerves, because the two nerves join together into a common sheath, and it is in that common sheath that we inject the local anesthetic. And that is the sheath of the sciatic nerve, that is a tibial nerve, and that is the common peroneal nerve. These two nerves are always enclosed in the Walker sheath, and underneath you have popliteal vein, which is more superficial, and the popliteal artery. The one thing that you should remember, that in large obese patients or in patients who have varicose veins, it is not uncommon to find additional veins inside the popliteal sheath. So always watch for it and use color Doppler before you perform the block. So here we have the ultrasound image and then an illustration. And what really makes this teaching tool so powerful is that you can go between the ultrasound and illustration as many times as you have to until you ingrain the sonoanatomical patterns. So that's the tibial nerve, that's the common peroneal nerve. Underneath and outside of the sheath is the popliteal vein and the popliteal artery. Definitely you want to avoid them. This is a needle insertion using an implant technique. We place the needle inside the sheath, and now we're going to start injecting the local anesthetic. Local anesthetic injection will always fill that sheath as well as separate these two nerves as the local anesthetic makes its way inside the sheath. That separation that you see also when you sonogram more proximally is actually what you want to see, and it's 100% sign that you are inside the sciatic nerve sheath. Here we can see the preloaded needle catheter system that is entering in an in-plane orientation. And as we watch on the ultrasound image, we can see the needle approaching the sciatic nerve in the popliteal sheath. So the needle is almost there now, and this is the common peroneal nerve and the tibial nerve, but we are now negotiating our way between those two components through the sheath, which we have dented now. I'll stop the video here for 1 second. So what we see here is that the needle has made its way to the sciatic sheath, and the sciatic sheath is now indented. So that's the tibial nerve. That is the common peroneal nerve. And our goal is to enter into the sheath between those two nerves without injuring them. So what we do is once we get to this point between the two nerves, we want to increase the angle of the needle to force the needle through the sheath, inside the sheath, in between those two nerves. Every continuous nerve block technique consists of 5 specific steps. Number 1 is placing needle inside the sheath. Number 2, injection that confirms the tip of the needle position. Number 3, passage of the catheter inside the sheath. Number 4, injection through the catheter to confirm that we are now inside the sheath injecting. And number 5, taping the catheter and securing it to the skin. So now here we can see how the needle makes its way inside the sheath. You oftentimes perceive a really very distinct click or a give as the needle makes its way inside the sheath. So that's the injection of the local anesthetic, and we can see how the two nerves, the tibial and the common peroneal nerve, now distance from each other as you inject the local anesthetic, which basically proves that the needle tip is inside the sheath, which was a step number 2. And now in a step number 3, we're going to pass the catheter. So the needle is stabilized. Here someone else is helping stabilize the transducer, but you can do that yourself or don't even have to use the transducer once you get experienced. The catheter goes in. The goal is to place the catheter at least 5 centimeters inside the sheath. And here we can see how the catheter has made its way inside the sheath when we start withdrawing that needle. And this is a step number 4 where we want to inject local anesthetic through the catheter, and that is the injection of the local anesthetic. And if you can see it over here, that is the sheath. We are now above the bifurcation. These two nerves are together here, common peroneal and tibial nerve, but we can see how the local anesthetic has spread substantially inside the sheath that contains the nerve. And that was the catheter placement for the popliteal nerve block. So what is left to do is to secure the catheter so it doesn't fall out. Here we clean off the gel, the excess of the gel, and apply Dermabond at the point of catheter entry. This is important because it seals a hole, because the catheter is smaller than the needle, and therefore the needle makes a bigger hole than the catheter. And when you inject local anesthetic or infuse it, there tends to be a leakage around the hole. That is why we use the glue, not to glue the catheter, but actually to seal that hole. We apply usually a Tegaderm or some other occlusive dressing, and a port for infusion of the local anesthetic. We're going to place it on the lateral side so it does not interfere with patient's positioning or ambulation. What is also super cool about the Next Level Nicera platform is the notes function. So if you go to the notes function, this is the note that we just took, popliteal block technique. And that gives me an entire overview of everything that I inputted. Let me bring this up and I'll show you how they work. Here are all my notes. When I access all my notes, I'll go to the last note I took, which was the popliteal block. So I will show the note. And as that note comes up, what's really cool is this is the stuff that I collected from internet, from various websites and online resources. So I found this image. This was from the publication by Manoj Karmakar and colleagues that used a very high resolution ultrasound imaging to actually describe very nicely the popliteal sciatic sheath, or the Volca sheath, if you will. I also found this video, which I found very useful. This was a video by our colleague Jin Kin Chin, who has really very nicely described the popliteal block in this video. So again, what really makes these notes function within the Next Level Nicera cool is you create your own script that is attached exactly to the point in the text or in the content that you are studying. Here's another resource that I found. I searched for the literature on popliteal block and I found this one. It was periarticular injections, IPAC, and the popliteal block. You can also, in your notes, insert the links to various websites and articles. So in here is the link which I inserted to this very useful literature, and I thought that this paper was pertinent to what I was studying. Again, the notes function in the Next Level Nicera are just amazing. And if I close this note, it will get me exactly to the lesson or the part of the content where I took that note from, which is very cool. So this way you can keep completely organized in whatever you do. If I click here on my notes, that's the note that we just took. What's really cool about this is I can edit my notes, I can print my notes and share it with others, or I can print it as a PDF and basically make my own book or study script with those notes. So if I click on that downloads my note. And if I open my note, this is the note that we just took. It is just a completely new, revolutionary way to learn. And that was the popliteal sciatic block on the Next Level CME. Again, it's an amazing e-learning resource that allows you to customize the content, take your own notes, insert your own videos, and teach or learn. But if you like our videos, do subscribe. That way you'll never miss the beat when the next videos from Nysora.com come on.